After an anonymous poll of 158 NBA players, Tyrese Haliburton was voted the most overrated player in the entire league. A result that today seems laughable, as right now the Pacers are just 4 games away from an NBA title. But being overlooked, undervalued, and going on to demolish the expectations surrounding him has been a common theme throughout Haliburton's entire career. He came out of Oshkosh High School in Wisconsin as a 3-star recruit. While he was ranked the 5th player in the state of Wisconsin, he was only the 51st point guard and was completely unranked in the country overall. He then went on to Iowa State, where he stepped into a significant role right away as a freshman. He was a full-time starter, averaging 34 minutes a game. While his production wasn't high volume, posting only 7 points and 4 assists, he was remarkably efficient, shooting 52% from the field and 43% from 3. This was a really strong start to his college career, though not yet the kind of season that firmly put him on the NBA draft radar. That completely changed in his sophomore season. His production jumped up to over 15 points, 7 assists, and 6 rebounds. Despite the increased volume, his efficiency remained impressive, shooting 50% from the field and 42% from distance. That level of production from a long 6'5" guard was impossible to overlook. By the season's end, Haliburton had established himself as one of the top point guard prospects in the 2020 draft. His strengths were immediately clear. He had elite size for the position, was a remarkable playmaker, highly efficient across the board, and projected as a plus defender. NBA Draft Room scouting report actually described him as a disruptive defender who can guard all over the court. On paper, Haliburton looked like a bulletproof prospect who checked basically every single box. However, there were still several aspects of his game that raised concerns about his long-term upside at the next level. He had a slim frame, showed a reluctance to attack the rim, and as a result rarely got to the free throw line. Additionally, while he'd been highly efficient from 3-point range, believing that success would translate to the NBA required looking past his very unorthodox shooting form. Ahead of draft night, we were hearing the same comparison over and over again. Lonzo Ball, another oversized pass-first point guard with unique shot mechanics, but also elite shooting efficiency in college. The comparison definitely made sense, but it's also a good example of the perceived ceiling of Haliburton by most at the time. While Lonzo was the 2nd overall pick in 2017, at the time of these comparisons to Haliburton, he was averaging 12 points and 7 assists. Once the draft actually got going, no one was expecting Haliburton to come off the board in the first few picks. But also, not many were expecting him to stay on the board very long. Most mocks had him inside the top 10 of the draft. The Suns at 10, a team that needed help in the backcourt, really did feel like the floor. Now obviously that didn't prove to be the case. Pick after pick went by, and Haliburton wouldn't be selected until the Kings at 12, a team that already had a young star point guard in De'Aaron Fox, but just couldn't pass on the value they were getting with Haliburton here at 12. As a rookie, he immediately proved to be the steal of the draft. He averaged 13 points and 5 assists, shooting 41% from 3. During his second season with Sacramento, he went up to 15 points and 8 assists, but then at the trade deadline would headline a package from the Kings to acquire all-star forward Domantas Sabonis from the Pacers. During his first full season in Indiana, he established himself as a future star in the league. He shot up to 21 points, over 10 assists, while also shooting 49% from the field, 40% from 3, and 87% from the line. We saw a similar level of production the following season, but the Pacers as a team were starting to quickly climb up the Eastern Conference power rankings. Haliburton got them out of a rebuild pretty much overnight, and it was time to get him some more help. At the trade deadline, the Pacers would give up a package headlined by Bruce Brown and 3 first-round picks to acquire Toronto Raptors star forward Pascal Siakam. The move pushed them into serious playoff contention. They knocked the 3rd-seeded Bucks out in the first round, the Knicks in round 2, but after getting swept by the eventual champion Boston Celtics, their playoff run went overlooked. By the time we hit this current season, while they were without a doubt considered one of the better teams in the East, many didn't see a world where they could come out of the conference. The Celtics were running it back with their roster, and the Knicks had gone all in during the offseason, bringing in Karl-Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. Then as the season progressed, it felt like the Pacers became even more of an afterthought in those contender conversations, as the Cavaliers had entered the mix with a dominant regular season showing. The Pacers had a good year. They finished as the 4th seed in the conference with 50 wins. Haliburton was averaging 19 points and 9 assists a game, but while they would finish as one of the top seeds, just 1 game back of the 3rd-seeded Knicks, in the eyes of many, there was a massive gap between them and those top 3 teams in the East when entering the playoffs. Strong evidence of that is that their championship odds were just 66-1. Flash forward to today, and it's safe to say most were completely wrong. To this point, the Haliburton-led Pacers have dominated, knocked out the #1 seeded Cavs in just 5 games, and are now on their way to the finals after beating the Knicks in 6. Haliburton was the popular choice as the biggest steal on draft night. He was the consensus steal of the draft after his rookie season, and now 5 years later, is not just a steal from that class, but one of the top point guards and playoff performers in the entire league. So who were these 11 players selected before him, and what are they up to now? The first overall pick belonged to the Minnesota Timberwolves, who decided to select 6'4" shooting guard from the University of Georgia, Anthony Edwards. There was definitely some debate surrounding who this selection should be, but by the time Minnesota was on the clock, Edwards was locked in to be the top selection. The former 4th overall high school recruit was coming off a freshman season where he averaged 19 points and 5 assists. The efficiency wasn't ideal, but the talent and upside was completely undeniable. He boasted a 6'9" wingspan with a built frame. He could jump out of the gym and was blatantly the top on-ball creator in the class. So far since getting to the league, he hasn't disappointed in the slightest. He finished runner-up for Rookie of the Year in his first season, became an All-Star by his 3rd, led Minnesota to a Western Conference Finals in his 4th, and just recently wrapped up Year 5, once again leading the Timberwolves 1 round short of the NBA Finals. He put together his best individual season to date, averaging 28 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, while also emerging as one of the top shooters in the game today, as he shot just under 40% from distance while taking over 10 attempts a game. He was a deserving top pick 5 years ago, and that hasn't changed one bit. The second overall pick in this draft to the Golden State Warriors was 7-foot big out of Memphis, James Wiseman. Leading up to the draft, Wiseman was a tough player to evaluate. He had an elite physical profile, he had left high school as the top-ranked recruit in the country, but at the college level, we didn't get a chance to see much from him. When he played, he was dominant. He averaged 20 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 blocks. But that was only in 3 games. The NCAA ruled Wiseman ineligible after it was revealed that he received money for moving expenses from Memphis head coach Penny Hardaway. Knowing what we know now, this was probably the best case scenario for Wiseman. Had he played out the rest of that freshman season, the glaring flaws in his game we would see at the NBA level might have been unearthed much sooner. As a rookie, Wiseman averaged 12 points and 6 rebounds, but then at the halfway mark of what had already been an underwhelming season, he would suffer a torn meniscus, an injury that caused him to not only miss the rest of that season, but the entire following 2022 season. When he finally returned, there just wasn't a role available. He played in 21 games for an average of less than 13 minutes before being sent to the Pistons as part of a 4-team deal that brought Gary Payton back to the Warriors. To finish the year in Detroit, he had his biggest role to date. He was playing 25 minutes a game, posting averages of 13 points and 8 rebounds. However, the following season, his role would take a hit once again. He came off the bench and saw his averages go down to 7 points and 5 boards. During the offseason, he would sign a 2-year deal with the Pacers, a contract that really appeared to be his final opportunity to turn things around. And unfortunately, we'll never know if he could have done that. After just 5 minutes on the court in the season opener, he suffered a torn Achilles, the worst injury in the sport, one that typically is a career ender for players outside the top tiers of the league. Currently, Wiseman's without a team after being traded to the Raptors at the deadline and waived shortly after. The 3rd overall selection by the Charlotte Hornets was 6'7" point guard LaMelo Ball, a player that despite having not touched the collegiate court, was easily the biggest name in this draft. His journey to the 3rd overall pick was an up and down one to say the least. As the age of an 8th grader, he was an instrumental part of a high school national title alongside his 2 older brothers. By his sophomore year, he was dropping over 90 points as one of the top-ranked recruits in the country. But from that point, things quickly went downhill. He left high school and went to play professionally overseas, then played in a league created by his father. This time really hurt his draft stock. In fact, many didn't see a path back to being a projected top pick in the draft. But luckily the critics were wrong. LaMelo would attend Spire Institute, a much more traditional setting, and his stock started to quickly climb back. Shooting up to 6'7" also didn't hurt. Then after a year, he went to play in the NBL in Australia, where he really impressed and finally returned to top draft pick discussions. He stuffed the box score, averaging 17 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists. Then after going inside the top 3 of the draft, LaMelo got off to a really hot start. He took home Rookie of the Year after averaging 16 points, 6 assists, and 6 rebounds. He would make his first All-Star appearance in year 2 after going up to 20 points a game. Since then, he struggled to stay on the court consistently, but he's continued to be one of the top young guards in the league. This past season, he averaged 25 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds. The 4th overall pick was made by the Bulls, who decided to go with 6'7" forward from Florida State, Patrick Williams. Now, Williams' numbers as a freshman weren't all that crazy. In fact, he actually spent the season coming off the bench, averaging only 9 points and 4 rebounds. But while he didn't have the production we're used to seeing from a top 5 pick in the draft, his size, coordination, athleticism, and defensive versatility had scouts very excited about his long-term future at the NBA level. Over his first 4 seasons with the Bulls, we saw pretty similar levels of production. He averaged 10 points and 4 boards. Come the end of his rookie contract, he was a reliable 3-and-D presence, and it felt like a breakout was on the horizon. At least that's how Chicago clearly felt as they signed him to a 5-year, $90 million extension. A deal that so far he has not lived up to. He's coming off the worst year of his career, averaging 9 points and 4 rebounds, while shooting less than 40% from the field. The Cleveland Cavaliers had the 5th pick, which they used to select 6'5" Auburn wing Isaac Okoro. After a season with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland in the backcourt, the Cavs were desperate for help defensively, so it wasn't surprising at all to see them go with the top perimeter defender in the class. At the NBA level, Okoro had a slow start. He was a solid defender as expected, but after a rookie season where he shot just 42% from the field and 29% from 3, it was unclear if the defense would be enough. But luckily, he quickly ramped up his efficiency over the next few seasons. He never became the player that the Cavs were hoping for when they used a top 5 selection on him, but today he's a solid role player. He played 19 minutes a night for the top-seeded Cavaliers, averaging 6 points, shooting 37% from distance. The 6th overall pick belonged to the Hawks, who went with 6'8" big out of USC, Onyeka Okongwu. Okongwu was coming off a freshman season where he dominated on the defensive end, while also averaging 16 points and 9 rebounds. Early on in Atlanta, he didn't get much action. He averaged just 12 minutes and 5 points a game as a rookie, but since then, we've seen his production tick up each and every season. Currently, he's averaging 13 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists. The 7th overall pick was made by the Pistons, who selected 6'5" French point guard Killian Hayes, the only other point guard taken before Haliburton. An interesting situation looking back, as Hayes and Haliburton had very different prospect profiles. Haliburton heavily relied on his production to go in the lottery of this draft, and as mentioned was criticized for his odd shot form and ability attacking the rim. Hayes, on the other hand, had production that there wasn't much to take away from. Playing in Germany, he averaged 13 points and 2 assists while only shooting 29% from 3. Those numbers are clearly not what landed him this high in the draft. Instead, it was the tape. He was a fluid lefty with great touch at the rim and a really promising shot-creating skill set. At the NBA ranks, however, it quickly became apparent that he wasn't quite the offensive talent many thought. His rookie season was terrible. He averaged 7 points, 5 assists, to over 3 turnovers, while also shooting just 35% from the field and 28% from 3. At least on the offensive side, it hasn't gotten much better since then. He was waived by the Pistons at the end of last season, and ahead of this year signed with the Nets, but after only 6 games was waived once again. The New York Knicks at the 8th spot felt like a very possible landing spot for Haliburton, but ultimately, they decided to pass on him and go with 6'9" Dayton forward Obi Toppin. Toppin was coming off an absolutely dominant sophomore season. He averaged 20 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists, shooting an absurd 63% from the field and 39% from 3. Just in terms of production, it really doesn't get much better than that. To begin his NBA career though, we wouldn't see much of Toppin. As a rookie, he averaged only 11 minutes and 4 points a game. By his 3rd season in New York, he'd only gone up to 16 minutes and 7 points. There really just wasn't a place for him in the rotation. So ahead of last season, they decided to move on, sending him to the Pacers to team up with Haliburton in exchange for 2 second-round picks. Immediately, it was obvious that he was a perfect fit for Indiana's high-paced offense. Over the past 2 seasons, he's averaged 10 points and 4 boards, shooting 55% from the field and 38% from distance. The 9th overall pick to the Wizards was another foreign prospect, 6'9" wing Deni Avdija. The draw for Avdija as a prospect was blatantly obvious. He was a true point forward at 6'9". Now at the NBA level, it would take him some time to get things going. As a rookie, he averaged just 6 points on pretty poor efficiency, but things really picked up by the end of his rookie contract. During his 4th year, he averaged 15 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists, while shooting with 51-37 splits. It looked like he was now a foundational piece of a rebuilding Wizards team. But for some reason, they would trade him this past summer to the Blazers for Malcolm Brogdon and a 1st-round pick. A move that right now looks like a massive mistake. He's on one of the best contracts in the entire league and has continued to look like one of the most versatile young players. This year he averaged 17, 7, and 4 on really solid splits. As mentioned, the Suns at 10 appear to be the most likely landing spot for Haliburton going into draft night. They were yet to make the deal for Chris Paul and were an emerging young team with a clear need at the point guard spot. But obviously, they decided to pass on Haliburton and ultimately made one of the most surprising selections of the night, taking Maryland big Jalen Smith, a prospect that very few people even had mocked inside the lottery going into draft night. Initially, that seemed to be for good reason. As a rookie, he barely played at all, only appearing in 27 games for an average of just 6 minutes. His role would go up to 13 minutes in year 2, but midway through the season was traded to the Pacers for Torrey Craig. Over his 2 full seasons in Indiana, he averaged 10 points and 6 boards. Ahead of this past season, he signed with the Bulls and averaged 8 points and 6 rebounds. The final selection before Haliburton came off the board was made by San Antonio, who selected 6'5" wing out of Florida State, Devin Vassell. He was coming off a freshman year where he proved himself to be a reliable 3-and-D wing, averaging 13 points as a 42% three-point shooter. That quickly translated to the NBA level. By his second season, he was averaging 12 points, shooting 36% from distance. By his fourth season, he had shot up to 20 points a night. Most recently, he averaged 16, 4, and 3 while shooting with 44-37 splits. And there it is. Those are the 11 players selected before Haliburton.